So, without further delay, please help me welcome John Hope Bryant. John, good to have you here. I'm excited to hear your talk. Thank you.
Honored to be with you. I'm really honored to be with you today and sad at the same time. I want to thank you for that gracious introduction, by the way. You'll be happy to know it's not 40 million views now, it's 100 million views. And that is 100 million views in less than a couple years. So there's a lot of movement around this movement we call civil rights, from civil rights to civil rights. I want to thank my friend Brian McGowan for encouraging me to do this. I want to say welcome to all of my fellow brothers and sisters there at the Puget Sound Economic Gathering. We are sitting in a moment in history right now. And history doesn't feel historic when you're sitting in it. It just feels like another day. But that doesn't mean the moment that we're in is not, in fact, historic. You know, I'm a little nervous. I don't normally get nervous. But I'm a little nervous today because it's my first. I've done hundreds of what I call armchair conversations with leaders from big and small companies, big and small governments, our federal government to state government to international, since this pandemic hit. But this is the first keynote. And it's the first keynote I've done digitally. And there was a little nervousness about given the moment, whether I could communicate, whether I could translate, whether I could transmit the passion, the connection. You know, we're not human beings having a spiritual experience, I believe. We're spiritual beings having a human experience. So energy matters. Could I make you feel what I feel? Could I get into your hearts and not just your heads? Well, that's something that you're going to have to decide. That's not up to me. My job is to show up and show out and lean in and give it everything I've got. To be not just a PhD, but a PhD too. And that's sort of your job today. It's not about me. And it's not about you. That's where we lose it. When we start focusing on the transaction and not the relationship. When we start focusing about what we get versus what we have to give. When we start focusing on getting paid versus building something powerful and transformational, we lose it. I'm gonna get back to a moment about why I think, believe, know in my soul that we're sitting in a moment in history. And not just because it's a global health pandemic, not seen in 120 years, or an economic crisis, which we're all feeling. You're going to talk a little bit about that, a lot about that in the next coming days, but hopefully more on solutions and where you're going and where you've been. You know, it's raining here in Atlanta, as it rains often there in Seattle. But rainbows only follow storms. You cannot have a rainbow without a storm first. So pain is necessary for growth. You cannot even grow without legitimate suffering. So don't walk away from it. Don't push away from it. Don't avoid it. It's part of the lesson. So we have this economic crisis, this global health pandemic, and a 400-year-old social justice reckoning of Black America, or with Black America. And I believe right around the corner, environmental sustainability that we're going to have to deal with. And so we have this moment, but the moment's not defined by the things that brought you there. It's defined by how you respond to those things. I'll get to that in a minute. Let me back up for a moment and say a little bit about why I believe Seattle is so special. That whole region that surrounds Seattle and Washington. You all know that you're home to 2 of the 4 trillion-dollar market cap companies founded there, Amazon and Microsoft. I know Mr. Gates. I don't know him well, but I've had a chance to spend a little time with him and converse with him about my ideas and his. And I've met the founder of Amazon as well. These are visionary leaders, not afraid of the future, leaning into it. You know that story. And you know even that the other 2 trillion-dollar market cap companies also have offices there and are leaning in. But that doesn't seem to be enough of inspiration for you. You're doubting yourself a little bit. You're seeing yourself on national TV, tied to protests and tied to frustrations and issues of police brutality or the concerns around police brutality and lack of opportunity. And you're seeing the jobs temporarily fall away, and you're wondering whether this is some kind of an end. Yes, it's an end to a sentence, not the end to the paragraph. And after the first paragraph, there's another one. And then there's a chapter to the book that you're about to write. Seattle has some other interesting and wonderfully inspiring attributes. It was founded circa 1851 formally, although for 4,000 years before that, it was inhabited by Native American Indians. And I believe a gentleman named Denny Party, if I got the name right, was the early traveler and, one could argue, small business owner who came and settled there. And I believe it was a year after, Seattle was actually formally named in honor of a Native American chief. I guess Denny Party and other European settlers could have named it after themselves. But I think somebody had the wisdom to share the wealth, to share the opportunity, at least back then. And so Seattle takes its name from an Indian chief. The Indians actually helped to build the cabins of those early settlers. You look at Seattle today and you have Scandinavian, broad-based European influences, you have still Native American influence, you have an influx of Asian influences because they've seen Seattle to be an inviting place. In fact, the numbers of Asians have increased as well as African Americans have increased over the decades in that region because it has been and represented for many a beacon of hope, a place of inclusion. Don't doubt yourself. Your story in this way is in many ways the story of the South. It's the story of Atlanta, where I'm located at right now. I talked to one of the founders of modern Atlanta just last night, my play father, my mentor, the last remaining lieutenant for Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., Andrew Young, Reverend Andrew Young, Ambassador Andrew Young, Dr. King's right arm in the movement. And I'm always reminded that when I'm talking to him, I'm sitting in that moment in history, that Atlanta really shouldn't have been what it was. Memphis should have been Atlanta. Birmingham, Alabama should have been Atlanta, named after an industrial city in England, Birmingham, England. These were bigger cities, had bigger populations, more industrial fiber, a better place for an airport. But they decided to argue over race and who got to the white water fountain or who went to the black water fountain. Stupid stuff. And Atlanta decided to argue over who got the money. Who built some wealth? The color in Atlanta was not white or black. Ultimately, it was green. And by the way, Atlanta didn't start out that way. Atlanta was backwards. I mean, Atlanta was one of the original slave plantation states. It was a brutal place in its early founding. And then at some point, it turned a corner. And the battle that changed America was really the Battle of Atlanta, the March to the Sea. Atlanta was burned to the ground. And the Union Army marched through here, breaking the spirits of the Confederates marched all the way to the sea to say you've got no place to go and no more arguments to wage. And that was really a turning point. And by the way, 20 black ministers met in Savannah, which wasn't burned down, not far from here, with General Sherman, Secretary of War Stanton. And they were asked, what do you want? Reminds me of today. Did they want welfare program? No. They want handouts? No. They said, we want land. We want to do for ourselves. A hand up, not a handout. And this conversation, Brian McGowan and I talk about this, it should never be about pitchforks or prosperity. It should be about all people having an ability to rise. Well, that meeting in Savannah resulted in what we now know as 40 acres and a mule. That happened in January 1865. And in February 1865 came the mule. January was the land. In March 1865 was the creation of the Freedmen's Bank by Abraham Lincoln, chartered to teach free slaves about money. And then unfortunately, Lincoln was killed the next month, April of 1865. And Reconstruction fell away, that vision fell away, and we never finished that unfinished business. There was never, unlike South Africa, which had the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, or Rwanda that had the Gacaca courts, there was never a reckoning, not a reckoning, there was never a trial or a process by which people acknowledged that they were wrong, acknowledged that they had been wrong, apologized, and we healed. That process never happened. And we kicked that ball down the court. We don't have time for this history lesson, and this is not what this purpose of this meeting today is about. But I want you to understand that this is analogous to you getting into an argument with your mother-in-law, and you don't really like your mother-in-law, but you respect her. I love a mother-in-law, by the way. And you slight her, and sometimes down the road, 4 months later, there's something goes on, it's factual, and she should back you up, but she doesn't. She takes the other side because she can, because she feels insulted. She felt insulted, and you never made it right. Think about a wound that's 400 years old that was never made right, and how much pain is embedded there. Dr. King said that rioting and violence was a voice in the language of the unseen and the unheard. He didn't endorse that. People will get that wrong. He was explaining it. He also said it was an unproductive exercise, that it doesn't lead to anything positive or prosperous for all. And there's no business plan in rioting. But it is an acknowledgement that people are fed up. And by the way, the rioters and the looters and those who are protesting in the streets in the early 1900s, beginning of the 20th century, were 100% white. Early Europeans, maybe your grandfathers and grandmothers, who were angry and upset because this country wasn't working for them. And about 50 years later, you have the birth of the legitimate middle class. You have the early birth of that with my friend Henry Ford III and his great-great-great-grandfather creating the modern middle class when he paid workers double what the average was, which I believe it was $5 a day. And that created enough wealth where they could buy the cars that they were building. And voila, you had the middle class. It was good for his business because he didn't have transient employees flipping from one place to the other. They stayed put. But it was also good for society. It was win-win. It was that day's equivalent of a living wage. And Seattle leads the way today as one of the progressive cities that has a modern minimum wage. But I try to live my life by this credo: talk without being offensive, listen without being defensive, and always leave even your adversary with their dignity. Because if you don't, they'll spend the rest of their life trying to make you miserable. It becomes personal. We're having a family feud here. This is a spat. It's a family fight. And we got to make it right. We got to knock it off because we're all brothers and sisters. And by the way, we have these spats up until now have been about every 100 years, 1760 to 1776, 1780, thereabouts. Then you had from about 1860 to 1880. Then you had from about 1960, really 1955, but yeah, 1960 to 1975, 1970. Dr. King was killed in 68. So was Bobby Kennedy. So was John F. Kennedy. So was Malcolm X. This was a period really more violent, more disturbing than what we're experiencing right now by far. But we have digital lives today, and we have social media and 24-hour news that amplifies and electrifies our challenges and our problems. And we're early for the crisis now. This shouldn't happen until about the middle of the 21st century. But this is because I believe we've kicked this can down the road without a solution, without true reconciliation. And now we've just got to solve it. Let me go back to the founding fathers and talk a little bit about that, because that wasn't nirvana either. They literally wanted to kill each other. A couple of them did. It was Burr and our first Secretary of the Treasury, who was brilliant, who's probably, by the way, he was from the islands, had a single mother, who had an interesting trade. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if Mr. Hamilton was part brother. I hope you guys are laughing there. You got to have a sense of humor about things. But they got into many spats. Many of them were harmed. One of them were killed. These are the founding fathers. These geniuses. They also many of them owned slaves. Conflicting ideologies in the midst of their soaring rhetoric about coming together. And then in the 60s, Dr. King's leaders wanted to throttle each other. I know because I talked to Ambassador Young to get the stories firsthand. Dr. King hated conflict. So it was Ambassador Young's job to work it out. And the only time Dr. King threatened to fire Andrew Young, Ambassador Young, was when he got frustrated and decided not to work it out. He said, Andy, if you don't do that job, you have got no use for you. You're Mr. Inside and Mr. Outside. So his first role was to take the far liberals and the far conservatives within the civil rights movement and bring them together and create a win-win solution, a strategy that Dr. King could move forward with. And Dr. King was the only Black leader really talking to white America. Every other Black leader was only talking to Black America. He said, I'm here to redeem the soul of America, not save Black people. I'm here to redeem the soul of America, not save white people. I'm here to redeem the soul of America, not save poor white people from rural America, from everybody else. I'm here to save the soul of America, not to take one side of a party or another, or to build walls versus bridges. He said, I'm here to talk about the redeeming of the soul of America from the triple evils of war, racism, and poverty. He was trying to bring us together. And he gave his life to take down a whites-only side. Now, one additional piece of history, and I'm going to come to, I think, where we are today. And then I'm going to come back to Atlanta. In the civil rights movement, you see the visuals of the marches. That's what we most see. And by the way, they were black and white, just like they are today, which in some ways is inspiring. And it's young people. And where will we be without young people? Young people are idealistic. They expect the best of us. You hear me? They expect the best of us. They want us to live up to our ideals and to our rhetoric and to our promises. They don't expect us to, as President Clinton once told me, to live through the creed that you can't expect someone to agree to the truth when the lie is paying their paycheck. They don't expect us to rationalize, which is to tell in some ways rational lies. They expect us to step up. Young people expect us to do that. And when we don't, they do, to remind us of who we used to be. We may get frustrated with how they do it, but we should be very glad that they do it. So Dr. King and Ambassador Young and others, and women in the movement who never got credit, by the way, they shut down those economies in the South. This is very important. You don't hear this part of the story. They shut down the economies and through marches, peaceful marching. They knew what they were doing. And then they wouldn't march after 4 or 5 o'clock because Dr. King knew that the press had to get that film on a plane to New York City to process for the 6 o'clock news. Remember that? Some of you from 30 years ago. And Dr. King was a brilliant marketer of the moment. And he also then told his friend, Andrew Young, Andy called him, I call him Bastard Young, Andy, I need you to take off the overalls and put on a business suit. Some of you need to take off a business suit and put on some overalls and go to the community and listen to what they have to say. God gave you 2 ears and 1 mouth, so you listen twice as much as you talk. You learn amazing things when you go to the community. I try to go at least once a month. But he said, Andy, I want you to do the opposite. Take off the overalls and put on a business suit and go meet with 100 business leaders in town and listen to what they have to say and cut a deal. That's right, cut a deal. So Bastard Young went and met with 100 business leaders after the town's economy got shut down. And the business leaders were saying, how do we get back? How do we get our economy back? And it was simple, take down the whites only signs. And so those who integrated the South was not the government. It wasn't the city leaders. It wasn't the mayor. It wasn't the governor. They were standing in the door saying no more. They had short-term solutions. Cut this, do that, pull out the armament, so cut the budgets. It was the business leaders who took down those whites only. So think about it now. It was a Woolworths, it was a J.C. Penney's, it was a soda shop, it was a water fountain, it was a bus company, which was in privately owned. They wanted their customers back, and they didn't care whether the customer came to the front door or the back door of the bus. The color of the currency was green. Because when they shut down the bus company, Black people created Uber, which was the black taxis. we would push everybody, drive around in an informal network of cars. That was the Uber 70 years before. And it's funny, but it's serious. Because the business leaders said, no mas, this is not, we're winning a battle, losing the war. Then the business leaders went to the mayor and said, knock it off. It was the business leaders who integrated the South. Think about this now. It was the business leaders who inspired change with our more enlightened political leaders. Let's fast forward. Dr. King wins the Nobel Peace Prize, and the business leaders in Atlanta did not want to honor him. Little known story. And so the mayor of this city had the enlightenment to go to the CEO of Coca-Cola, the former CEO, who's at a hunting lodge, Robert Woodruff, and said, I need your help. The business leaders won't honor Dr. King. And Woodruff put down his stuff and said, wait a minute. He called the business leaders at Coca-Cola and said, wait. Let me, L-E-hyphen-M-E, let me understand this. This man has won the biggest international award in the world. We're a global supply chain company, Coca-Cola. And if you don't want to honor this man, because we relate to what he did, we're going to move out of this backwards town and go someplace people who've got some sense. I don't care whether you like him or not. You should respect what he's done. And it's good for Atlanta. And if you don't, we're leaving. He put his beliefs where his wallet was, or put his wallet where his beliefs was. And one problem in this country, we have taken our culture and put it inside of our economy versus putting our economy inside of our culture. That little bit more of that later. And 2 weeks later, the ballroom was full. I call it the Woodruff Effect, named after Robert Woodruff. I think we need to see in Seattle and around the world. I'm trying to encourage you because I think Seattle's a beacon of hope for this country. Before this crisis hit, you were I think the largest economic metropolitan area in the country, if not the largest, one of the largest. You're a beacon of diversity, a beacon of transparency, a beacon of inclusiveness. But this family dynamic of all this diversity in one place is also a food fight if you don't handle it right. We can't just walk past our neighbors. We have to walk hand in hand with our neighbors. And racism is also scientifically stupid. I just got to say this. I mean, 99.9% of all human DNA is the same. Why are blacks dark? Because Africa's hot. And the sun is direct. I hope you guys are laughing. The sun is direct. Why is the hair kinky? Because God gave you had brilliance to make sure that the the kinkiness would absorb the heat rays. So when the heat hit the softest part of your body, which is over your brain didn't cook. It absorbed and it dispersed the heat rays. The nose was wide to serve as a cooler for the air, an air conditioner for your air, for the heat as it came to your lungs. Why are black folks' lips big? I don't know, but everybody wants them. You should be laughing. Why are whites have a lighter pigmentation? The Scandinavians in the audience, those from the Nordic countries that know, because Europe's cold and you got used to that cold weather. Why is your nose narrow? To heat the air before it goes into your lungs. Why is the hair stringy and long? To cover your ears so your ears don't get cold. God knew exactly what he was doing. But racism is stupid because we're the ones who put up city dividers and state dividers and country dividers. And it was the place where the continents were stuck together and then they broke up. And the water separated us, but that's the only thing that should be separating us, not each other. You know, our enemy is not inside this country. It's really our competition is actually outside of the country. And everybody wants to be an American, but Americans, it seems, we're busy fighting with each other. And they love it. Who's the they? Not my Chinese friends, but China, the country, wants to be us. They're at war with us, an economic war right now. We're at war. Russia is at war with us right now, but they can't afford to kill us with bombs and bullets. They want to divide us and separate us and then make us subservient consumers and payers to their economic growth. I don't know about you, but I'm not going out like that. If we're going to win this or lose this, let's do it fairly. Let's do it with all the oars in the water and leaning against the wheel. Back to Atlanta and the civil rights movement. That move by Woodruff, I think, was transformational for the city and for Coca-Cola. Do you know that one of the largest growth segments for Coca-Cola to this day are blacks here in America and blacks in Africa? Do you think that part of that is tied to the allegiance that they have, the respect that we have, the admiration for what they did? You bet. There are so many examples. We don't have time in this keynote for me to give it to you, of companies that did the right thing and saw that it paid off. The most diverse places in America are the most economically prosperous. We're the two largest economies in America. First of all, what's the biggest economy in the world? The U.S. economy. We're only at 350 million people of a world with, I think a total of 8 billion and growing right now. It's an extraordinary statistic. But the two largest, and we're the most diverse place in the world. And we're hooked on freedom, which is part of the reason why you can't get anybody to cooperate, because everybody is hooked on freedom, okay? It's a good thing and a bad thing. But the two most diverse places in California are the two most economically prosperous, California and New York. And Seattle's right there too. And where are the economies stuck? Stuck on stupid. Why are they back? Where are they backwards? Places that reject diversity, places that want to argue over stupid stuff. To this day, Mississippi, the poorest state in America, Alabama right next to it, they want to argue about silly stuff. Atlanta decided to focus on what was important. And just so I can pivot to what I think is where we're going next, an important conversation, where do we go from here? Dr. King's last book. I'll just say that after all these travails, these challenges, and black folks and black leaders and white leaders got together in Atlanta, started meeting, started trying to understand each other, build relationship capital. Because if you hang around 9 broke people, I guarantee you'll be the 10th. I don't care how smart you are. And if you just leave brilliant poor people, brilliant black and brown people outside of the power loops, you're not going to end up with another Steve Jobs or another Bill Gates. You end up with the biggest drug dealers in Seattle, the biggest gang leaders. I mean, all a gang leader is a frustrated union organizer. All a drug dealer is an illegal, unethical, corrupt entrepreneur. But they understand import, export, finance, marketing, wholesale, retail, customer service, security, territory, logistics. You're starting to get it. When you nurture somebody in the wrong soil, you end up with thorns and not roses. And then those thorns will stick you. We have a chance here to do it right. I think God has given us a chance for a reset, not a reboot. Because I think that this is all, coincidence is God's way of staying anonymous. I don't think that 2020, all this happened in 2020 by accident. I think it happened to give us a shot to reset. Atlanta decided in 1960 it had enough of the past and wanted to lean toward the future. And we became the only international city in the South. Thank you, Andrew Young. The biggest airport in the world, it will come back and air travel will come back. Thank you, all the leaders, including Andrew Young. became a beacon of international companies investing in this city. $70 billion invested in just Ambassador Young's term alone. The Olympic Games came here because Andrew Young had relationships all around the world and brought them to this city. It wasn't just him, it was a bunch of people, but my point is one person can make a difference. Robert Woodruff, Andrew Young, Abraham Lincoln, Frederick Douglass. It doesn't have to be these big, Bill Gates, right there, being a beacon of the world for this crisis and where we go from here. But we can't just lay this off to household names because every big company was once a small one. And now I'm coming to you. We can't subcontract our democracy. We can't lay this off to someone else. We can't pass this down to our children. We can't avoid the obvious conversation. I don't want to get it too much into the past because that's not why you're gathered today. But I would encourage you to go look online at some of the stuff I've done about where we came from the past. And I've done videos like 400 years of history in 4 minutes, right? Because it's not hard to explain of how did we get here? Where the word millionaire came from, 1850, the cotton trade. Where was the richest city in America, in the world in 1850 per capita, not just Mississippi in 1850, the cotton trade, the slavery. It was repression. And that was GDP until Lincoln became president. That was a leading GDP driver in this country. For 246 years, my ancestors were not building capital, they were capital. And then we were set free and weren't never given the memo about free enterprise, entrepreneurship, small business creation, financial literacy, how the world works, or any of that stuff, and said, oh, it's a monopoly game. You're three days late or 300 years late, but join the game. What can you do to level the playing field? Not a giveaway program. I believe in the James Brown version of affirmative action. Open the door, I'll get it myself. We want a hand up, not a handout. And by the way, this benefits everybody. What Atlanta found was that when you expanded the pie, everybody won. Yes, black people and brown people got some of the pie, but my white friends got much more, and they wouldn't have got any of it if the Olympics hadn't showed up, if the airport hadn't showed up, if the economy is, do you want 100% of something small or 10 or 20% of something huge? Isn't that the Seattle way? Isn't that the Puget Sound way? Isn't that how you've grown? How you become who you are by having dreams larger than your problems? Finding ways to coexist and collaborate, to be brothers and sisters in opportunity, if nothing else. We just need to expand that opportunity to all of God's children. And that's why I wrote the new Marshall Plan. It's also why I wrote this new book, Up From Nothing, that comes out next month. And I won't bore you with the details of either in this 12 minutes I have left. And I really wish we had time, a way to do Q&As. I'd love to engage with you, but I promise you, if you want me to come back, if I haven't put you to sleep, I will come back. I'll show up in person at another time so we can continue this conversation. But I think we have a chance here to grow GDP. I think we have a chance here to retell this story. I don't think it's a foregone conclusion that China is going to be the largest economy in the world. I don't. That's like saying that it was a foregone conclusion and that Japan was in, what was it, 1980? Remember that? We were all learning Japanese. All right. It was a foregone conclusion. And then out of nowhere came Silicon Valley and the internet and Bill Gates and all these folks that we're talking about in the connected economy. Changed everything. GDP went through the roof. We walked right past Japan. They're still stuck. What if we made saving the environment, I'm just riffing here, a business case? How many tens of trillions of dollars of that? If we led that, how about if we told everybody you're going to be in the game? Because half of this economy is small business. So half of all jobs in this country are small business. 70% of all jobs in this country are employees with 500 employees or less. 99% of all the GDP in Los Angeles, where I grew up at, one of the top 20 economies in the world, larger than the country of Turkey, 98% plus of all those businesses have 100 employees or less. Are we looking for love in all the wrong places? Or why don't we look at the left behind as an opportunity for the lift up? There's a problem, though, with the business plan, because half success is confidence and belief. My mother told me she loved me every day of my life, and I believed it. I saw two murders and one death before I was 9 years old. My uncle was run over in front of me because he was selling drugs in the wrong neighborhood. My best friend, George, was murdered because he was hanging around with a thug, Tweet, who lived next door to me. My parents' marriage and the assets we had created destroyed because my dad could make it but couldn't keep it because no one taught him financial literacy. Is what he didn't know, that he didn't know that he was killing him, but he thought he knew. But the pride kept him from asking my mother, who was a financial genius, for help. You see, it happened even in my own family. So we won the battle and lost the war. Then our overhead, when your outflow exceeds your inflow, then your overhead will be your downfall. And then you get desperate. And then you start looking for someone to blame. And when you're looking for someone to blame and no one, or government leaders or prosecutor leaders and not civic leaders, not giving a clear vision, Bible says where there's no vision that people perish, a clear vision forward, we don't have that vision, then we start attaching ourselves to things that we know, like class and race and religion and ideology and separation, and we start looking for someone to blame for our problems. Let me tell you what, that doesn't pay, and it doesn't solve, and there's no way to get out of this. It's rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic. The ship is sinking, and we're picking drapes. Go pull up the new Marshall Plan. It's a plan that's a plan that's larger than the problems that we now see. I wrote it 3 months ago from the Oakland Institute. It's now the second highest internet search for the new Marshall Plan in the world, right below the president's comment about same. I respectfully think that I'm talking about hope, and that's a much more compelling and sustainable business plan than our grievances. By the way, I want to commend the Secretary of the Treasury and the Treasury Department for what they did on PPP, which I helped, had a small hand in helping them develop. We can find common ground. We can work together. This is not the Republican Party or the Democratic Party. Right now, we're at war. It's a get it done party, and we all have to get it done. But if we've been kicking rear end, or worse, ignoring people for 400 years, and they really don't have the confidence and the belief to compete, like I was told by my mother every day of my life that I was somebody and she loved me. And when a banker came in my classroom who was white and taught me financial literacy when I was 9 years old, and I asked this banker, sir, who was wearing a blue suit, a white shirt, and a red tie. Remember him to this day. And I said, sir, what do you do for a living, and how'd you get rich legally? And I was serious. I never saw a businessman before. I never saw a banker before. There was no office buildings or skyscrapers in Compton, California. No legitimate wealth that I'd ever witnessed. What do you do? He said, sir, I'm a young man, I'm a banker, and I finance entrepreneurs. I said, sir, I don't know what an entrepreneur is, but if it's legal and you're financing it, I'm going to be one. And I went home and opened the dictionary, today is the internet, for the word entrepreneur, and that's what I am to this day. And then when I was 10 years old, I opened the neighborhood candy house and put the liquor store out of the candy business when I was 10 years old. What do you think that did to my confidence, my self-esteem, my belief in myself? I did it legally. And then I found girls, lost the business, recurrent theme in my life, but then I got focused. And I am that guy to this day, with an employing hundreds of people, with $100 million asset in one company, and in economic activity of about $40 million in self-made enterprises, up from nothing. And this is America. This is the royalty in America. We don't have royalty like in Europe. We have small business owners, entrepreneurs, and we created celebrity as our own form of regalness in this country. We've done it, and we can do it again. But this time it has to be an orchestra that includes all of us, and not just some of us, in order for us to rise and even to survive. So let me deal now with mentality. The mentality for us to win. Go online, Google search the new Marshall Plan. I have the living wage plan there, a living wage for all, which we do through the earned income tax credit. So businesses aren't carrying that burden. We all would pay for it, but we all benefit from it. I explained it there. It's financial literacy for all. It's a reimagining of education from a private asset to a public good. It's K through college, not K through high school, because you cannot have a nation with half this nation is high school educated and expect not to have racism, bias, ignorance, disruption, and people who understand larger concepts. They don't have the exposure, they don't have the education. My mom and my dad didn't, and I saw it. I saw his limited view of the world, even though he had an expansive aspiration. So we've got to go through K through college, as we did for the World War II, by the way. We've got to have capital access for all, get out a giveaway program, opportunity for all. We've got unleash American opportunity, American imagination, which means we need the right mindset. So here we go. I got 5 minutes. The biggest problem, by the way, 100% of these in-place unfortunate shootings of blacks by police were in 500 credit score neighborhoods. I don't know if you know that. I love stats. I love data. 500 credit score neighborhoods. In my poor white neighborhoods are rioting too. They're just rioting at the ballot box. Those are 500 credit score neighborhoods. But in black urban neighborhoods, black and brown urban neighborhoods, and white rural neighborhoods is what you see. In a 500 credit score neighborhood, a check casher next to a payday loan lender, next to a rent-to-own store, next to a title lender, next to a liquor store, next to a pawn shop, and a church down the street trying to make it all a little bit better. That's the community therapist. But that's the surviving business, not a thriving business. Listen to me now. People just trying to survive. And can you create anything when you're surviving? And the answer is no. All a patent is a monetized idea. That's all it is. So the nations who have the most peace and transparency and prosperity and education and opportunity and stable families, access to credit, understanding of how the math works and how opportunity works, and democracy and freedom have the greatest level of patents and uplift. And those that are in war and civil disobedience have the lowest level of the same. What do you think is happening in urban America, rural America, underserved America? These 500 credit score neighborhoods, they're at war with themselves because they don't know who to blame. And they can't talk to power. That's why you're seeing the protests. That's why you're seeing the riots. We even came in with a horrible way to explain our problem called defund the police. Who wants to defund the police? Even the guys saying and women saying that when their mother gets mugged, they want to call the police. You don't want to defund the police. You want to restructure budgets so that policing are not doing 15 jobs, 14 of which are not trained for. You want mental health to do mental health. You want community-based policing. You want the psychologist. You want the counselor. You want we got the police doing all these jobs because we defunded all this stuff 25 years ago and put mental health on the street and said, mayors, you handle it, or society, you handle it. That has not worked. We're branding ourselves the wrong way. We're branding ourselves by the problem and not by the solution. We got to look at the hill, the light on the hill. So you got a surviving mentality. Listen to me now. And then you got the middle class created in World War II. That's the thriving mentality. That's a getting mentality. Get a house, get a job, get a paycheck, get some income, get a vacation. It's great. Get some kids. But that's not what built America. That's what sustains America. That's what sustains our freedom, our democracy, our way of life. What built America, and this is the drop the mic moment, are you. Winners. The winning mentality. Winners build. Build a community. Build a church or a series of them. Build a company. Build a brand. Build jobs. Build wealth. Build Seattle. Build Puget Sound. Reset. Build America. We need a software upgrade on capitalism. As my friend Shimon Peres, God rest his soul, once said to me when I was talking to him, John, you tell people when they criticize your work, even if you want to distribute money like a socialist, you have to first collect it like a capitalist. But no one's taught people how capitalism, free enterprise works, so they reject it. People say they hate rich people. No, you don't. You hate rich people till you become rich. But when you see a system that's not working for you, you assume it's gamed. So everybody who has won believe they were a winner before they won anything. I was watching the documentary on Michael Jordan last night. Believed he's a winner before he won anything. Oprah Winfrey, Bill Gates, Jeff Bezos, whoever it is. People, you think about this. You thought you were a winner before you ever won anything. And then you got off to do it. So people say, black people need to get off their end and stop being like, whoa. Your grandfather came from wherever in Europe. Everybody didn't leave from there. So my book talks about this. The people with a type A personality came to Ellis Island with $2 in their pocket, looked up at the statue and said, I'm going to live the American dream for me and my family. Either you're criminally insane or you have high self-esteem, you have belief in yourself, you have type A personality, and you were a winner, you just hadn't won yet. And that's why Goldman Sachs was a guy named Goldman and a guy named Sachs selling financial services door to door. Nobody wanted to buy. Or Sam Walton was a pickup truck in a storefront in a high school education. That's now Walmart. Every big company was once a small one, but they had a winning mentality. What are we doing to nurture that today? What are we doing to reinstate that today? Do we even represent that today? Us. Are we communicating that to others? Are we acting like Robert Woodruff? Are we acting like the founders of Seattle? Or have we lost our way temporarily? I believe in you. America can't be this country without you. You are the Western expanse. You are the edge of the Western expanse after slavery. This is where freedom of opportunity started. This whole Western expanse. All right. This is the second coming of our American story. But now we need you to help to lead the way to the resetting of the American story. We need to build a nation of winners. Think about this, and I'm done. Why are Blacks successful in the arts and entertainment? I thought 45 minutes was a long time. I now realize I can run my mouth forever. Talking to me is like getting a glass of water out of a fire hydrant. So the experiment, I guess, worked. At least it worked for me. I don't know how you're enjoying it, but I enjoyed it immensely. But I now know you can't tell the story in 45 minutes. But hopefully I've tried. Hopefully you've appreciated and felt me. But we are not understanding how success works. Blacks have succeeded in the arts and in sports because the playing field is level and the rules are published. Okay? The playing field is level and the rules are published. I'm wrapping up. So if you ran fast, you won. You sang well, somebody bought your music. It's easy. And what do? We farm club those people. If you were in middle school, we found you as a football player or as a basketball player. Elementary school, middle school, junior high, high school, college, the pros. If you're a recording artist, the scouts would find you in what used to be choir practice or in church or in band room or music room in the middle schools. And they nurtured you all the way up. Who's farm clubbing? Engineers, investment bankers, accountants, business managers, professionals, small business owners, entrepreneurs, health professionals. What's driving, 2/3 or more of American GDP? And who's farm clubbing it? No one. We just leave that to, the ether. So what happens is the rich get richer and the poor get poorer. And again, I'm going to end where I started. You hang around 9 broke people, you'll be the 10th. So you're here not because you're great or brilliant or amazing. You're here because you have the right culture, the right family, the right environment, and the right friends. And somebody hooked you up. Now it's time for all of us to hook each other up. Not because it's charity or because it's goodwill, because you have great moral fiber, but because it's in your enlightened self-interest. It's in all of our enlightened self-interest to unleash pent-up American opportunity. I think that there is 2 to 3% of American GDP minimum capped in these underserved marketplaces. And just by becoming more of who you want to be anyway, you'll do well and do good too. Thank you very much for having me. Thank you for being a beacon of hope. If something I've said is touched you the wrong way, blame it on my head, not my heart. I mean well. I just think that sometimes we've got to appreciate that problems are the opportunity. We just need to see it that way. I love you and I appreciate you. And make a great conference. Let's go be the change we want to see in the world.